This movie reminds us that Ian McKellen is not 93 years old, he's only like 76, so give him a break. Mr. Holmes is directed by Bill Condon, written by Jeffrey Hatcher. It's based on the book A Slight Trick of the Mind by Mitch Cullen and stars Ian McKellen, Laura Linney, Milo Parker, and Hattie Morahan. And in Mr. Holmes, Sherlock Holmes, played by Ian McKellen, has retired from the detective business and he's now living on this countryside with his mother and her kid, and he's just gonna live out the rest of his days tending to bees and whatnot. But there's something about his last case that is bothering him that he can't remember. It's what caused him to leave the detective business, and throughout this movie he just struggles to remember what that is. Now, if you watch the trailers for Mr. Holmes, they're really misleading in my opinion because they try to make the movie look like this big kind of mystery thriller thing where, you know, you'll have a lot of really intense case solving stuff, but it's not really that. It's just this quiet little drama about this old man trying to sort of reconnect with other people. And you know what, despite a certain subplot in the movie that's really out of place in my opinion, I really enjoyed Mr. Holmes. It has beautiful visuals and an incredible performance from Ian McKellen. Like I just said, this is a gorgeous looking movie that's thanks mostly to the cinematography from Tobias A. Schleisler. You get lots of shots of both these wide English landscapes as well as like these extreme close-ups of smaller details that Holmes notices, which to me kind of mirrors how Holmes in this movie tries to see the bigger picture of human nature when he's so used to focusing on little details. And speaking of details, the period detail in the production design here is impeccable, but it's also quite sparse, which for me is a really wise choice given that the setting is a countryside. You won't really see a lot of like the big, you know, English buildings we usually see in period movies, but it's smart. I also have to commend the makeup they used on Ian McKellen here to really make him look 93, and we tend to forget that there is still an age gap between 76 and 93. Not all old people look the same, which is nice to be reminded of. And Carter Burwell's score for this music is very light and elegant and really fits the material well. Now, it's interesting for me how the editing here by Virginia Katz puts us in the mindset of Holmes as he struggles to remember details and make sense of memories. This movie is told in a non-linear structure and most of it really works, like you really get into his headspace. But what really surprised me about this movie is the character of Mr. Holmes himself. He's supremely fascinating given that he's being overshadowed by Watson's books, because in this movie Watson writes about their cases but he exaggerates details to make Holmes look like a superhero of sorts, and you can tell he's really kind of struggling with that. There's a lot of regret that comes with, you know, his unsolved cases. There's a lot of pressure on him, but at the same time you can really tell where the legend stems from. You can see bits of that, you know, old Sherlock glimmer in him. The other characters in this movie don't really have as much to do, of course, but they still end up revealing different parts of Mr. Holmes, but they're not just plot devices, they do work as their own people. And speaking of those people, the cast here is great. Laura Linney plays Mrs. Monroe. She's the mother who Mr. Holmes is living with, and she's kind of the opposite of him in that when she does work, she does it out of a sense of duty, whereas Mr. Holmes kind of does it out of this weird fascination with human nature. And Milo Parker, who plays the son, is not annoying at all, thankfully enough, and he has what Mr. Holmes kind of sees as his lost curiosity, so they have this really nice kind of parent-son relationship. But of course you go to this movie to watch Ian McKellen and he is incredible. He's just tremendous. He's still one of the best actors working today. You don't see Gandalf, you don't see Magneto. This is just, you know, he's a character. And he's extremely moving. There's a certain scene in particular that will definitely just immediately have tears spring to your eyes. He's just so good. But throughout the entire movie, he does keep this sense of curiosity. Like, he seems genuinely curious about the people around him and whatnot. And during the flashbacks when he's a bit younger, you can still see that spark in him that we're so used to seeing in Sherlock Holmes. And the way Bill Condon treats this subject matter is so elegant. It has a lot of respect. It almost makes this movie feel like a biopic. I had to remind myself that this is not a true story. And the way he fills his images with poignancy is great. But I do have a few issues with Mr. Holmes the more I thought about it. For one, I think, you know, while the plot is presented in a non-linear fashion, while I said that it does work for the most part, there's a certain subplot set in Japan that I think could have been taken out. Like, I understand the reason for this subplot being here, but it ultimately feels like the point of that could have been combined with like the main plot, because every time they go back to Japan, it kind of halts the momentum of the story. And the actual detective work that you see Mr. Holmes do in this movie, there's nothing really that special about it. We keep hearing about how he's such a great detective, but when you actually see him do detective stuff, like it's not really that special. I kind of wanted a bit more. But otherwise, I still think Mr. Holmes is a pretty good movie. I think it's definitely worth checking out if you know what to expect. Don't expect like this big mystery thing. Just, you know, it is what it is. It's a quiet little drama that's ultimately about the importance of fiction and storytelling, which is up my alley. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Mr. Holmes. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.